Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry for jumping on late. We're beginning with chapter 24, verse 45. So we just ended off yesterday just with a technical question that Eliezer is telling the family the story, and he refers to this woman as Rivka, and we haven't seen him get that information that her name was Rivka. So Ramban on Pasuk Memhei, V'tam v'nei Rivka yotzeis v'chado al shechma, ki biyosa b'veisa shama shma. He didn't know her name, but he kept on hearing them refer to her as Rivka, so he figured this is Rivka. Oh, or we know there are many things not recounted in the Chumash, many aspects of conversation not recounted in the Chumash. So he asked her name, she told her name, she told him her name, and it's not recounted in the Chumash either way. I just want to also mention, and this is probably understood, but it's just worth mentioning. Also in this verse, at the beginning of the verse, Eliezer makes a point of telling the family that just as I completed making this prayer to God, that this is going to be the sign of who the right woman is, lo and behold, Rivka comes right out. And that, of course, that's how it's recounted in the Chumash when the event is occurring as well. What's the relevance of that? It's very exciting. It's very dramatic. You couldn't have written the story better, but what's the relevance of that? So just an interesting sforno on Pasuk Memhei. Ani terem achalel dabir. V'zos hora. This fact that Rivka walked out immediately is an indication that this is part of God's plan. In other words, that this is part of God's plan, that Rivka is the right one. So it's not just that I had this request that there was someone who happened to fulfill the request. It's that it happened right after I asked it of God. So this is further confirmation. Interesting to think about. I also want to mention, we mentioned yesterday that the Sforno says that Eliezer was not taking this as an absolute. He's asking God to give him this sign, and hopefully somebody will come forth and do this, and hopefully he'll ascertain that this is the right one. The fact that it happened right away gives further confirmation, because according to this Sforno, Eliezer needs further confirmation, or at least would benefit from further confirmation. Okay. Verse 47. So Eliezer is continuing to tell the story, and he explains that this fine young lady came out and then provided me to drink and provided my camels to drink. And I asked her, Va'omar bas miat, and I asked her, who is your father? Because remember, Avram had said it should be somebody from his extended family. Va'tomer bas Besuel ben Nachora sheyodolo milka, I'm the daughter of Besuel. V'asim hanezem al apa, v'atzmidim al yodeha. And I placed the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her hands. That's not exactly how it happened. If you look back at the psukim of the event, he gets so excited when this woman comes out and offers the drink. He gives her the gifts, and then he asks her who she is, who her father is. But he flipped the order when he's speaking to the family. Why does he flip the order? Look at Rashi. Rashi Pasuk Mem Zayin V'Eshal V'Asim Shina HaSeder. Eliezer changed the order of events. The real story is, first Eliezer gave the gifts, and only then he asked who her father was. You have to know your crowd. So he knew what would happen. If they would have said this, if he would have said this, they would have said to him, you gave her these gifts for betrothal before even knowing if she was related. Why would you do that? So the answer, of course, is because he was so confident this was from God. But that probably wouldn't play well to them. So he flips the order. That's what Rashi says, a very famous Rashi. The Or HaChaim says something different. Just interesting to hear a different answer to the question. Or HaChaim on Pasuk Mem Zayin, V'Eshalos Avo Asim, Shina L'Chashashas Rama Usam. He changed because he was concerned that they would take things, but not because they would or wouldn't accept it. He was worried they would pull one on him. Why? Kiyomru shenasan hachafetzim kodem litzad masha shimshatu veim nogim lavia. You're only going to become wealthy if you argue on every penny. So here's the question: why did Eliezer give Rivka these gifts? There's two theoretical possibilities, just looking broadly at the events. One is that he gave her these gifts because he wanted her to marry his master's son. Possibility number one. That is, of course, the reason he gave her these gifts. Possibility number two is he's giving her these gifts in gratitude for her assistance. Now, she's a member of her father's household. So if it's given to her in gratitude for her assistance, then who should be the real recipient of the gifts? Her father. If it's given to her for her hand in marriage, then it makes more sense for it to be hers. So Eliezer is worried that Besuel and Lavan are going to come up with a whole presentation why they should be the recipients of this jewelry. So he says, I found out that she was appropriate to marry Yitzchak, and then I gave her the gifts. So the father has no claim. It's interesting to see how far this kind of stuff goes. Okay, moving on to verse 67. So Eliezer brings her back to Yitzchak. She meets Yitzchak. Eliezer tells Yitzchak the whole story. And now in verse 67, Yitzchak brought her Ha'oela Saraimo to the tent of Sarah, his mother. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Sarah is long past. He married Rivka. He loved her. And Yitzchak was consoled after the passing of his mother. What's the significance of saying he brought her to Sarah's tent? So Rashi says, if you look at Rashi on Pasuk Samach Zayin, Ha'oela Sarah imo, Vayvieha Ha'oela, Vaharehi Sarah imo. Actually, he says, he brought her to the tent and she proved herself to be like Sarah. What does that mean? Klomar, V'nases Dugmas Sarah imo. She became like a microcosm of what Sarah was like. Meaning, Shekol's manch Sarah kayemes hayanir daluk meir of Shabbos there of Shabbos bracha mitzuya v'isav adam kashur al ha'oel. There were certain miraculous things that would just happen around the tent during Sarah's lifetime. The candles would burn from Friday to Friday. There was always a blessing in the dough. There was this cloud like a cloud representing divinity over the tent. Umishemesa paskum. And once Sarah died, all those things stopped. Shabas Rivka chazru. And now when Rivka entered the tent, it was like Sarah was back, that all these signs had returned. It's a very beautiful medrash, extremely touching, and just the human aspect of this medrash is really, really beautiful. That's what Rashi brings down. If you look at the Ramban, he says a line into the Ramban Pasuk Samach Zayin. The Tama Kasav, the meaning of the verse, Ki Yisapir Bakavod Shenoag Yitzchak Be'imo. He says the pshat over here is that the pasuk is telling us the honor with which Yitzchak looked back to his mother. Ki me'es shemesa Sarah lo natu Allah. They did not pitch Sarah's tent from the day that she died. Ki amru, because they said, Lo savo isha acheres el oala gvira nichberes. This tent, this spot is reserved for Sarah. That was always the conduct. V'kasher ba Rivka hevia el oelahu lichvoda v'sham likacha. So now Rivka comes, and now Yitzchak brings her to the tent of his mother. No one else had been allowed to stay in his mother's tent up until this point. And now she's brought to the tent of his mother. That's the juxtaposition at the end of the pasuk. He loved her and he was consoled. Yirmos, even after she passed, it was of great distress to him that his mother passed. And he really was inconsolable until he felt consolation in his affection for his wife. Okay, so that's because the Ramban says, because Why does it have to say that he loved her? Of course, he loved her, but the point is his affection for her was a consolation. Just very interesting. Both of these are very interesting to think about. Okay. Moving on to chapter 25, verse 1. By Yosef Abraham continued, Vayikach Isha Ushma Keturah. And he married a woman. Avram married another woman. Now Sarah, this is past. Avram married another woman, and her name was Keturah. Okay. Rashi says, Keturah Zu Hagar. That's always a surpriser if you hadn't known this. Avram married Hagar. Hagar, who had been a maidservant at Avram's home. Hagar, the mother of Ishmael. Hagar, who had been expelled from the home, along with Ishmael on the instructions of Sarah. V'nikreis Keturah. She's called Keturah. Al Shem Shenoi Maseh Kiktores, because her actions are pleasant like incense. Ukshekasra Vishekasra Pischa Shal Nizdavka LaAdam B'Yom Shapir Shemei Avram. She, from the time that she had left Avram's house, she didn't marry anyone. And now Avram marries her. So this is certainly a surprise. And there's a very interesting kliyakar on this, and we will see this tomorrow, God willing. So we discussed this morning how Eliezer even knows that her name is Rivka. We discussed this, the Ramban, we discussed the Sforno regarding the relevance that Eliezer made to the members of the family, of Rivka's family, as the timeliness of her coming out. We discussed both Rashi and Or HaChaim regarding why Eliezer flips the order of events when he's talking to the family. And we discussed Rashi and the Ramban regarding the idea of bringing her to the tent and the mention of Sarah.